The Xorlian Empire had ruled the galaxy for over 3,000 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds and thousands of species. None had ever successfully resisted them. Their warships were the size of small moons. Their weapons could destroy planets. Their soldiers wore armor that made them nearly immortal. The Xorlians believed they were the natural rulers of all life. Admiral Vraxtol stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance. His gray skin shimmered under the blue lights. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the small blue planet on the screen. "This is the world that has been broadcasting signals into space?" he asked, his voice full of disbelief. "Yes, Admiral," said his second-in-command. "They call it Earth." Vraxtol made a sound like rocks grinding together. Among the Xorlians, this was laughter. "And they have not even left their own solar system. Pathetic. They will make good servants." The Admiral had done this many times before. Find a new world, show them the power of the Empire, and watch them bow. It was almost boring now. "Prepare a diplomatic party," he ordered. "Let us see these humans for ourselves." On Earth, the news of alien ships entering the solar system had caused panic. World leaders gathered at the United Nations in New York. They needed someone to meet the aliens. John Miller sat in his apartment, drinking coffee and watching the news. His phone rang. "Miller," he answered. "John, it's Susan Clark from NASA. We need you at the Pentagon. Now." John Miller was not a typical diplomat. At 52, he had gray hair and always wore rumpled suits. But he had solved impossible problems in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. He understood people. The government hoped he would understand aliens too. 6 hours later, Miller stood in the White House Situation Room with Susan Clark. She was a physicist with short blonde hair and a serious face. Around them, generals and politicians argued about what to do. "We should show our military strength," said General Harris, pounding his fist on the table. "That would be suicide," said Susan. "Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." The president looked tired. "What do you think, Miller?" John took a deep breath. "We meet them. We listen. We learn their weaknesses. Every empire has them." 3 days later, the Xorlian ships appeared over Washington, D.C. They blocked the sun like metal clouds. People stared up in fear and awe. Some ran. Some prayed. Some took pictures with their phones. The smallest Xorlian ship was still larger than the largest human aircraft carrier. It landed on the National Mall, crushing trees and monuments. A ramp extended from its side. John Miller stood at the bottom of the ramp with Susan Clark beside him. Behind them was a small honor guard of soldiers. The president had wanted to come, but Miller had advised against it. "We don't put all our eggs in one basket," he had said. The first Xorlian to walk down the ramp was almost 7 feet tall. It wore armor that glowed with strange lights. Its 4 eyes moved independently, taking in everything. "I am Sub-Commander Zelkar of the glorious Xorlian Empire," it said through a translator device. "Who speaks for your world?" John stepped forward. "I am John Miller. I represent the people of Earth." Zelkar's eyes focused on John, then on the small group behind him. "This is your reception party. This is how you greet the greatest power in the galaxy." "We're simple people," John said calmly. "We don't have much experience with visitors from space." The sub-commander made the grinding sound. Primitive indeed. The reports were accurate. He handed John a small device. "These are our terms for your world's surrender and integration into the Empire. You have 48 hours to accept." John took the device without showing emotion. Susan's face went pale beside him. "We look forward to learning more about your great empire," John said smoothly. As the Xorlians returned to their ship, Susan whispered, "They expect us to just surrender." John watched the aliens with careful eyes. "They expect us to be simple and easy to control. That might be our only advantage." Behind them, photographers captured the moment when humanity first met the galaxy. No one smiled for the pictures. The United Nations building in New York was packed. World leaders sat shoulder to shoulder. Guards stood at every door. On the main screen, the Xorlian demands played in 20 different languages. Earth will provide 5% of all fresh water, 10% of all minerals, and 20% of all biological resources to the Empire yearly. Earth will accept Xorlian governors in all major cities. Earth will provide 10,000 human specimens yearly for scientific study. Earth will disband all military forces. The room was silent when the recording ended. Then everyone started shouting at once. John Miller sat quietly next to Susan Clark. They watched Peter Wright, the UN Secretary General, try to bring order to the room. "We cannot possibly accept these terms," said the French president. "But how can we fight ships that can destroy planets?" asked the Japanese Prime Minister. Peter Wright, a tall man with dark skin and a calm voice, raised his hands. "We must try to negotiate better terms. We have no choice." The Russian president stood up. "No choice. They want to farm us like cattle." Miller leaned over to Susan. "What did you find out from that device they gave us?" Susan's eyes were red from lack of sleep. She had spent all night studying the Xorlian technology. Their technology is amazing, but there's something odd. It's all very standard, like they haven't invented anything new in a long time. Miller nodded. Empires get lazy. They stop thinking. The debate continued for hours. Some wanted to fight. Some wanted to surrender. Some suggested hiding people in underground bunkers. Finally, Miller stood up. The room went quiet. "The Xorlians think we are primitive and stupid," he said. "Let's not prove them wrong just yet." Lisa Brown was not supposed to be in this meeting. As a strategy analyst at the Pentagon, she was too low-ranking. But she had convinced her boss to bring her by showing him her plan. Now she stood beside Miller. "The Xorlians expect us to either fight and lose or surrender completely," she said. Her voice was steady despite her nerves. "But there's a third option." She pressed a button, and a new slide appeared on the screen. "We pretend to cooperate while secretly preparing. We learn their weaknesses. We build our strengths. And when the time is right, we strike." The Chinese premier frowned. "You want us to lie to a species that can destroy our planet?" "Yes," said Lisa simply. "It's that or become pets." 3 days later, Miller and Peter Wright met with Sub-Commander Zelkar in a specially built reception room in Geneva. The walls were decorated with Earth's greatest art. The tables were loaded with Earth's finest foods. "We accept your terms," said Wright, his voice carefully controlled. Zelkar's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Wise decision. You will find the Empire can be generous to obedient servants." Miller bowed his head, hiding the fire in his eyes. "We have prepared a list of resources we can begin supplying immediately." "Good," said Zelkar. "Admiral Vrax Toll will be pleased by your cooperation." He had expected more resistance. "We are a practical people," said Miller. "We recognize superior power when we see it." That night, Miller met with Susan, Lisa, and a small group of military and scientific leaders in a room swept clean of any possible listening devices. "They bought it," he said. "Now the real work begins." General Frank Jones, a square-jawed man with a buzz cut, looked skeptical. "You really think we can fool them long enough to make a difference?" "They're arrogant," said Susan. "They think they've seen everything in the galaxy, but they've never seen humans before." Lisa opened her laptop. "I've identified locations for hidden research facilities, places the Xorlians won't think to look." "And I found something interesting in their communications," said Susan. "Their ships use a standardized system. If we can crack one, we might be able to crack them all." Miller looked at each person in the room. "The Xorlians expect us to be primitive, helpless, and obvious. Let's be none of those things." Outside the window, the Xorlian ship floated above the city, its lights casting strange shadows. Inside the ship, Admiral Vrax Toll received the news of Earth's surrender with a satisfied grunt. As expected, he said, prepare the resource extraction teams and select the first group of specimens. He had no idea that beneath his ship, the supposedly primitive humans were already planning his downfall. 1 month passed, then 2, then 6. The Xorlians believed they had won. They set up bases on Earth. They took water, metals, and food. They acted like Earth was just another conquered world. Daniel Martinez sat in his small apartment, typing on 3 computers at once. He had dark circles under his eyes. Empty coffee cups covered his desk. He hadn't slept properly in days. Daniel used to break into bank computers for fun. Then he got caught and went to jail. Now the government needed his skills. They gave him a clean record in exchange for his help. A message popped up on his screen. It was from Susan Clark. Any progress? Daniel took a deep breath and typed back. I think I found something. The Xorlians use the same code for everything. It's like they never expect anyone to try hacking them. He sent her a file. It contained the communication codes for the Xorlian base in Colorado. With these codes, humans could listen to everything the aliens said to each other. Across the country, Susan received the file in an underground lab. The lab was hidden beneath a farm in Kansas. The Xorlians thought it was just a place where humans grew corn. This is amazing, she said to Karen White, who stood beside her. Karen was a scientist who studied very small things, nanomaterials. She could build machines smaller than a human hair. Now she was studying pieces of a Xorlian shuttle. Look at this, Karen said, pointing to a microscope. Their technology isn't really more advanced than ours. It's just different. They use materials we never thought of. Susan looked through the microscope. Can we copy it? Better, said Karen with a small smile. We can improve it. In Nevada, Jack Taylor trained soldiers in a secret base deep in the mountains. Jack had been a Marine. He had fought in wars all over Earth. Now he was preparing for the biggest war of all. The Xorlians rely on their technology, he told the men and women in front of him. They'd forgotten how to fight without it. He showed them how to move without making noise, how to hide from Xorlian sensors, how to use the alien size and weight against them. They think they're superior, Jack said. That's their weakness. The soldiers nodded. Many had friends or family who had been taken by the Xorlians for study. They trained harder than they ever had before. Admiral Vraxtol was pleased with Earth. The humans were obedient. They provided resources on time. They did not fight or complain like other species. Perhaps we should use humans to help control other worlds, he said to Sub-Commander Zelkar. They seem to accept their place in the universe. Zelkar agreed. They are primitive but useful, like well-trained animals. The 2 Xorlians stood in their base in what used to be Central Park in New York. They watched humans work, loading materials onto Xorlian ships. The High Council will be pleased with your success here, said Zelkar. What the Xorlians didn't know was that every worker in the park wore a special device. The devices recorded everything the aliens said, everything they did. All that information went to people like Daniel, Susan, and Karen. And what they really didn't know was that the simple machines the humans used had been modified. Each one contained tiny cameras and sensors, designed by Karen. Each one collected data about Xorlian technology. In Washington, D.C., John Miller met with Lisa Brown in a small room under the Lincoln Memorial. They reviewed the latest reports. Daniel has cracked their communication codes, said Lisa. We can listen to everything they say to each other. Susan and Karen have made progress on understanding their weapons, said John. And Jack has trained over 5,000 soldiers in anti-Xorlian tactics. How long until we're ready? Asked Lisa. John looked at a map on the wall. It showed Xorlian bases all over Earth. Each one was marked with notes and information. We need more time, he said. Maybe another 6 months. We might not have that long, said Lisa. She handed him a tablet. The Xorlians are planning something new. They want our nuclear weapons. John read the report. and his face grew serious. Then our time just ran out. Contact everyone. We moved to Phase 2 immediately. Above them, a Xorlian ship passed by, its engines humming. The aliens inside had no idea that their primitive conquest was about to turn their world upside down. The Xorlian demand came without warning. Admiral Vraxtol stood in the White House rose garden. 4 armed guards stood beside him. His voice boomed through speakers. "Earth will turn over all nuclear weapons within 7 days," he said, "for your own protection." John Miller kept his face blank. Inside, his heart raced. They weren't ready yet. The plan needed more time. "Of course, Admiral," he said calmly. "We will begin right away." As soon as the Xorlians left, Miller called an emergency meeting. Key leaders gathered in a bunker 200 feet below the Rocky Mountains. The room was shielded from all Xorlian sensors. "We have to act now," said Lisa Brown. Her voice was tense but steady. "Once they have our nuclear weapons, we lose our best leverage." "But we're not ready," said General Frank Rogers. "The defense system isn't complete." Mary Johnson stood up. She was the director of a secret quantum computing project. She was small with gray hair, but her mind was sharp as a knife. "I think we are ready," she said. Everyone turned to look at her. "My team has created something that might change everything." She opened a laptop and showed them a program. It didn't look special, just lines of code on a black screen. "This is ALIC," she said. "Artificial Learning Intelligence for Counter-Extraterrestrial Operations. She can get into any Xorlian system we've studied." "And I?" asked Miller. "Not like any AI they've seen before," said Mary. "Alice thinks like a human but works at computer speed. She can adapt to new situations. The Xorlians don't understand that kind of flexibility." William Scott, a retired general now working as a military liaison, looked skeptical. "Can it really make a difference against their technology?" Mary smiled. "She already has. Yesterday, Alice took control of a Xorlian scout ship for 3 minutes. They thought it was a system glitch." The room went silent. Then Miller spoke. "How soon can ALIC affect all their systems?" "With Daniel's communication codes. 48 hours to prepare. Then minutes to execute." Miller looked around the room. "Then we have our answer. In 3 days, we meet with Vraxtol to discuss the nuclear handover. That's when we strike." For the next 2 days, humans around the world prepared. Secret messages went out to sleeper cells near every Xorlian base. Equipment hidden for months was made ready. Soldiers trained by Jack Taylor moved into position. No one slept much. The fate of Earth hung in the balance. On the 3rd day, Miller led a delegation to New York to meet Admiral Vraxtol. The meeting was set for noon in the former United Nations building, now a Xorlian Command Center. At 11:30, Mary Johnson sat in her lab with Daniel Martinez. They connected ALIC to the Xorlian network. Daniel's hands shook slightly. "Are you sure this will work?" he asked. Mary took a deep breath. "No, but it's our best shot." At 11:45, Susan Clark and Karen White activated devices in 37 locations around the world. Each device sent out a signal that human scientists had discovered by studying Xorlian technology. At 11:55, Jack Taylor and his soldiers waited silently outside Xorlian bases. They carried weapons designed by Karen. The weapons looked simple but contained technology that Xorlians wouldn't expect. At noon, John Miller shook hands with Admiral Vraxtol. "We are prepared to discuss the transfer of our nuclear arsenal," Miller said. Vraxtol made the grinding sound of Xorlian laughter. "Discuss? There is nothing to discuss. You will give them to us." Miller looked at his watch. "Actually, Admiral, I think there is quite a lot to discuss." At that moment, Mary Johnson said a single word to her computer: "Execute." LIC went to work. Across the globe, Xorlian systems began to shut down. Their shields failed. Their weapons went offline. Their communication devices fell silent. In the New York Command Center, the lights flickered. Vrax Toll's translator device stopped working. For the first time, Miller saw confusion in the Admiral's four eyes. "What is happening?" demanded Vrax Toll in his own language. Miller didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. He smiled. "I believe," he said calmly, "that the balance of power has just shifted." Admiral Vrax Toll had never known fear, not in 300 years of service to the Empire, but as the lights in the command center flickered and his guards' weapons stopped working, he felt something cold in his stomach. "What have you done?" he demanded, no longer bothering with the translator. Miller couldn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. "We've leveled the playing field, Admiral." Outside the building, Jack Taylor and his soldiers moved in. They wore simple clothes and carried what looked like basic weapons, but inside those weapons were systems designed by Karen White. Systems that could cut through Xorlian armor. Across the world, the same thing happened at every Xorlian base. Human forces that had been hiding in plain sight suddenly revealed themselves. In orbit, Xorlian ships lost power. They floated helplessly, unable to fire weapons or communicate with each other. Inside the command center, Miller stood tall. "For 6 months, you thought we were surrendering. In reality, we were learning, studying, preparing." Lisa Brown had a tablet that translated his words into Xorlian. The Admiral's four eyes widened. "Impossible," he said. "You are primitives. You can barely league your own planet." Miller smiled. "That's exactly why we won. You underestimated us because we're young. But the young can learn quickly. The young can adapt." Kevin Harris walked into the room. He was a medical researcher with kind eyes and a serious face. He carried a small device in his hand. "We've learned a lot about Xorlian biology," he said. "For example, we know you can't tolerate certain frequencies of sound." He pressed a button on the device. The high-pitched noise filled the room. The humans didn't react, but Vrax Toll and his guards fell to their knees in pain. "That's just one example," said Kevin, turning off the device. "We found many more." In the Pacific Ocean, the submarine U.S. Defiant surfaced in the middle of a Xorlian fleet. The Xorlians had never detected it. They had no idea humans had vessels that could move underwater, hidden from all their sensors. Michelle Garcia stood on the bridge of the Defiant. She was the captain, a woman with short black hair and steady hands. On her screen, she could see the Xorlian ships floating powerless. "Target their engines only," she ordered. "Disable, don't destroy." Her crew fired missiles that attached to the Xorlian ships. The missiles didn't explode. Instead, they released a substance that hardened around the engines, making sure the ships couldn't move even if they got power back. "Phase 1 complete," she reported over a secure channel. "The fleet is neutralized." In her lab, Mary Johnson watched as ALIC continued to control Xorlian systems worldwide. "Their technology is advanced but rigid," she explained to Daniel. "They haven't faced real challenges in centuries. They stopped innovating, stopped adapting." Daniel nodded. "While we've done nothing but adapt. Earth is harsh. We've always had to fight to survive." On the Xorlian flagship in orbit, now powerless, the communication system suddenly turned on. Admiral Vrax Toll's face appeared on every screen throughout the ship. The Admiral was on his knees. Behind him stood John Miller and Lisa Brown. Miller spoke directly to the camera. "Attention all Xorlian forces. Your systems are under our control. Your weapons are disabled. Your ships cannot move. We offer you a choice. Surrender, or we will be forced to take more aggressive action." The Xorlian crew stared in shock. This wasn't possible. Primitives couldn't defeat the Empire. Back in the command center, Vrax Toll glared at Miller. "The Empire has 10,000 worlds. You have only delayed the inevitable. When the High Council learns of this, they will send a force that will turn your planet to ash." Miller nodded to Lisa, who pressed a button on her tablet. "Actually, "Admiral, we're counting on them finding out. In fact, we're helping spread the news." Lisa showed him the tablet. On the screen was a message being broadcast on all Xorlian frequencies throughout the galaxy. "The invincible Xorlian Empire has been defeated by Earth, a world they called primitive, a species they underestimated. If we can do it, so can you." Vraxtol's face showed real fear now, because he understood what Miller meant. This wasn't just a defeat. It was the beginning of a revolution. The news spread faster than the Xorlians could stop it. Earth had fought back. Earth had won. Across the galaxy, species that had lived under Xorlian rule for centuries began to whisper. Some began to act. On the planet Novan, the blue-skinned locals disabled a Xorlian mining operation. On Krell, winged beings attacked a Xorlian garrison. On 20 other worlds, rebellion sparked to life. The Xorlian High Council called an emergency meeting. 12 ancient Xorlians gathered in a massive hall on their home world. Their skin was pale gray from lives spent indoors. Their eyes were dull from lack of challenges. "How is this possible?" asked the head counselor, her voice shaking with rage. "How could primitives defeat our forces?" The Minister of Conquest bowed his head. Admiral Vraxtol's reports were incomplete. He did not see the humans as a threat. "And now we have rebellions on multiple worlds," hissed another counselor. "This Earth situation must be dealt with immediately." The council made a decision. Admiral Vraxtol was to be recalled in disgrace. Grand Marshal Dozarath would take his place. Dozarath was known for his cruelty. He had crushed rebellions on 100 worlds. "He will make an example of Earth," said the head counselor. "No mercy." On Earth, celebrations were brief. Humans had won the first battle, but they knew more would come. They needed to prepare. Carol Davis had never expected to leave Earth. She was an astronaut trained for the first mission to Mars. Now she found herself captain of a captured Xorlian scout ship. Carol was tall with brown skin and steady hands. She had memorized the ship's controls in just 3 days. "All systems ready," she said to her crew of 6. "Let's see what this thing can really do." The small ship shot away from Earth, moving faster than any human vessel ever had before. Their mission: reach the edge of the solar system and set up an early warning network. As they passed Mars, Carol felt a strange mix of emotions. She had trained for years to visit the Red Planet. Now she was going much farther, in an alien ship. "Look at that," said her co-pilot, pointing at a screen. "The ship's database. It has maps of the entire galaxy." Carol smiled. "Download everything. Earth just got a lot bigger." Back on Earth, John Miller met with world leaders in the former Xorlian Command Center in New York. The room was filled with captured Xorlian technology. Scientists studied everything. "The Xorlians will return," Miller said, "with a bigger force. We need to be ready." Peter Wright nodded. "We've gathered reports from the captured Xorlians. They're already sending a new fleet, led by someone called Dozarath." "How bad?" asked Miller. "The Xorlians fear him," said Wright. "That tells us everything we need to know." Susan Clark and Karen White had turned their attention to the biggest prize: Xorlian ship technology. The room they worked in held parts from 3 different Xorlian vessels. "Look at this," said Karen, pointing to an engine component. "It creates tiny holes in space. That's how they travel so fast." Susan studied it carefully. "Can we copy it?" "Better," said Karen with a smile. "I think we can improve it." In orbit, humans had taken control of 5 Xorlian ships. Teams of engineers were learning to fly them. Others were taking them apart to understand every system. Edward Nelson watched the training from a control room. He had designed video games before the invasion. Now he was in charge of Earth's space defense grid. "The Xorlians only attack in standard formations," he told his team. "They've used the same tactics for centuries. No creativity." He showed them simulations he had created, based on Xorlian battle records. "See, always the same patterns, always the same responses. We can use that against them. On her way back from the edge of the solar system, Carol Davis detected something on her sensors. A massive energy signature at the edge of Pluto's orbit. "Command, we have incoming," she reported. "Biggest fleet I've ever seen on these sensors." She sent the data back to Earth. The images showed hundreds of Corellian warships. At the center was a vessel 5 times larger than any they had seen before. The Grand Marshal had arrived, and he was angry. The Xorlian fleet darkened Earth's skies. Hundreds of warships, each larger than the biggest human city, hung in orbit. Their weapons could turn continents to ash. Children cried. Adults prayed. Everyone looked up and felt small. Grand Marshal Dazarath stood on the bridge of his command ship, the Eternal Dominion. He was taller than Admiral Vraxtol, with darker gray skin and eyes that glowed red. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Open a channel to the planet," he ordered. "Let these creatures see their doom." On every screen, radio, and communication device on Earth, Dazarath's face appeared. His message was simple. "Humans, you have defied the Xorlian Empire. You will now witness the price of such defiance. You have 1 Earth day to surrender completely. Return all Xorlian prisoners. Hand over those who led your resistance. If you do not, we will destroy your major cities one by one until you comply." The message ended. The world went silent. In the command center beneath the Rocky Mountains, Earth's leaders gathered. The mood was grim but determined. "We knew this was coming," said John Miller. "Now we see if our preparations were enough." Linda Ross stood before a large map of Earth. As Secretary of Defense, she had overseen humanity's military response to the Xorlians. She was a tall woman with short white hair and eyes that missed nothing. "Launch the Prometheus Protocol," she said. Across Earth, hidden facilities powered up. In orbit, stealth satellites activated. From underground bunkers, missiles that looked ordinary but contained very special payloads launched toward the Xorlian fleet. Edward Nelson sat at his control station, surrounded by screens. His fingers flew over the keyboard. What had once controlled video game characters now directed Earth's real defense. "Activating defense grid," he said. His voice was calm. "Launching Phase 1. From oceans, deserts, and mountains, thousands of small spacecraft rose into the sky. They were no bigger than cars. Each held 2 pilots and weapons based on Xorlian technology, but modified by human engineers." "What are these toys?" asked Dazarath as his sensors detected the small craft. "Do they think to challenge our battleships with these?" His officers laughed. The Xorlians had always fought with massive ships. Bigger was always better in their minds. They didn't understand that humans had learned different lessons. On Earth, sometimes the smallest creatures were the deadliest. "Fighter units, execute battle plan Hornet's Nest," ordered Edward. The small human ships moved with incredible speed. They didn't attack in the formal patterns the Xorlians expected. Instead, they swarmed like angry insects. They targeted engines, sensors, and weapon ports. Dazarath watched in shock as his mighty fleet struggled to hit the tiny targets. Xorlian weapons were designed to destroy large ships or bombard planets. They were too slow to track the nimble human craft. "Impossible," he growled. "Increase power to all weapons. Destroy them." But the human ships kept coming. And now the special missiles reached the fleet. They didn't explode. Instead, they created small black holes that lasted for mere seconds. Brief tears in space. Linda Ross watched from the command center. "Activate the Prometheus drives." In the laboratory where they had studied Xorlian technology, Susan Clark and Karen White engaged their greatest creation, a device that could create controlled wormholes, doorways through space. Suddenly, the small human ships weren't just attacking from below. They were appearing inside the Xorlian fleet, between their massive ships. Some even materialized inside Xorlian vessels, their weapons firing before they jumped away through another wormhole. On his command ship, Dazarath raged as reports of damage came from throughout his fleet. "How are they doing this?" he demanded. "They were primitives mere months ago." His second-in-command had no answer. Like all Xorlians, he couldn't understand how a species could advance so quickly. The Empire had taken centuries to develop its technology. Humans had copied and improved it in months. "Sir," said a communication officer, "we're receiving a message from Earth." John Miller's face appeared on the screen. Behind him stood Edward, Susan, and Linda. "Grand Marshal," said Miller, "perhaps we should discuss your surrender."